Hello and welcome to the Lifetime Athlete Podcast and the Lifetime Athlete YouTube channel. I'm your host, John Zombro, and today is going to be a really fun show for me because I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk about the gear that I wore primarily and used during the late season elk hunting in Montana 2022, and also do a bit of a pack dump and go over the items that were in my pack. So as you know, here at the Lifetime Athlete, we celebrate athletes and athletic individuals of all ages and abilities, but we particularly support the original athlete, the hunter. And in my work as a performance coach and a physical therapist, I work with a lot of hunting athletes or athletic hunters, which is exactly what the modern backcountry hunter is. So if you happen to be listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to do my best to paint a picture with words, but if you'd like to see some of the items that I'll be going over, you can certainly check out the video on the YouTube channel. What I did, interestingly enough, was I separated the items that I'm going to go over into two categories. Most of the items that are on my left are going to be the clothing system that I used over this late season. And each of those items I have extensively tested, and I'm going to review them individually, probably via short videos and possibly podcast episodes. But this side does represent quite a bit of product testing that I've gone through. In fact, I should just mention that I don't have any affiliations or sponsorships. All of the items that I use, I purchase myself and I test them. And where this video is coming from is just from listener and viewer feedback, members of our community who have said, hey, John, if you have been doing these types of things for decades, both in terms of performance and in terms of being a backcountry hunter, would you give us some recommendations about the equipment that you utilize? So that's where I am coming from today. And to paint a bit of a story or a back picture, the general firearm seasons for elk and deer opened in Montana in late October, and we had essentially an early onset of winter the very opening weekend. And I was out on an extended camping trip. I talked about that on the podcast before, but all the rest of my hunting was essentially day trips. Now, there was one overnight bivvy, but I still used primarily the same gear with just a few additions. So what I'm going to show here are the items that I used for this late season, primarily in elk hunting, primarily on public land, or actually entirely on public land in the mountains. And this kind of represents almost wintertime conditions that we had. Temperatures ranged throughout this entire period from 14 degrees below zero Fahrenheit to 36 degrees above. And those were the conditions that I was existing in. And so I needed to set up my pack so that I could be prepared for that range of conditions and any contingencies or extraneous things that could have happened. And so that's where all of these things I've got laid out are coming from. And so maybe I'll begin just with the pack that I was running for this entire essentially 5-week period. And this was the Kuiu Icon Pro 3200. They don't make this exact model anymore, but they still make one similar. And what I like about this for me for the later season was it basically is a larger day pack. Now, I have used this on some weekend excursions, particularly when the weather is warmer, and it works fine for that. But what I really like about it is it has a number of buckles and straps and pockets. There's actually several outside pockets as well as several inside pockets, and that makes it easy to take all the gear that I think I might want and need and still have room for either a few extra items, or I can detach the bag and run this as well as a meat carrier. So that's what I was using. And I guess the only thing I wanted to show that I typically will keep is in these pockets, and these are not from any specific brand. I think these got moved on from some other gear way back in the day. Generally I'll have a bit of sunscreen and chapstick if I decide I need to use them. And then in this other pocket, I'll sometimes have a snack or an energy bar if I need something kind of quick. That's where that's going to go. And then the one on the other side of the pack, it's I'm not sure I can pull all this out to show you, but well, it has spare ammunition in it. So there's an internal sleeve in there that I was not able to pull out. But so I've got chapstick and sunscreen and snacks on one side, and then ammo in the other. And that's the pack that I was using. And I'm not going to do a big review or discussion of anything today, but if you have anything that you're seeing and you either want me to make sure that I cover it, or anything else, have a question about it, by all means, please reach out to me. Now, you can contact me via direct message at The Lifetime Athlete on Instagram. You can email me through the contact menu item at thelifetimeathlete.com, or in the video, you can leave a comment or question in the description box below. All of those are appreciated. I do read and respond to all of them, so feel free to utilize that if you would like. Okay, so getting right into the things that were in my pack. Since I went that direction first, I'm going to just go through everything that's in front of me, and I'll try not to go, excuse me, too quickly as I give my rationale for why I have these items in there. So first of all, I happen to have a balaclava. This one is from Kuyu. It's lightweight fleece, and I usually, and I'm going to talk about this later, I'll usually run hoodies anyway, but this just gives me an extra layer if it's really windy. I just need that extra bit of face and neck coverage. Weighs nothing, and I like having it in the pack. You can even roll it up and wear it as a beanie if you prefer. So it's a good functional piece. I'll keep it around. The other thing that I will typically do is I will bring along a set of super light liner gloves, whether these are made out of polypropylene, doesn't really matter. Excuse me, just I want something super light. Dries incredibly fast if you do get it wet, but it just gives you that extra little bit where you can run this inside of your glove, or just by itself. And where these really come in handy for me is if I'm going to be stationary, particularly if I'm glassing, and I need to keep myself warm, my fingers in particular, I'll run mittens, but sometimes I'll run these inside the mitten. So if I pop the mitten off, I've still got just a little bit of coverage on my hand, and that's also applicable for shooting situations as well. The other thing about these, and most of these you'll find, is you can actually operate your cell phone without removing the glove. So that's where these things come in. In fact, the mittens got used several times in this cold conditions. It's got to get, honestly, down probably into the teens before these even ever come out, but especially on some of those mornings when it was well below zero, and there were quite a few of them, these were quite handy. Okay, moving right along. I always carry a backpack cover. Now, primarily this sees more use in the summer or in the early season when there actually is rain, probably more so than any other form of precipitation. But on that opening weekend, we did have rain, sleet, and snow, and so these are nice. You can get these. This happens to be just a backpacking brand, and I probably did get this off Amazon. But a backpack cover is nice. Some people are not in favor of them. They like to run a dry bag on the inside of the pack. I think that does make a lot of sense if you're doing a lot of stream crossings, and you might end up getting your pack fully submerged. But I do like the backpack covers. These are fairly ubiquitous, like I suggested, elastic with a few straps. And I didn't actually take this out after the opening weekend. Got a ton of use then, and it was important. But then after that, it just got cold, and any precipitation that we had was snow, for which I did not need the cover. But nonetheless, I just always keep this in the pack. So moving right along in any order, I will usually have some hearing protection in my pack, and I like to have a little redundancy built into that. So the plugs that you wear around your neck, almost like a necklace, I'll just generally make sure as part of my process every day as I'm getting ready, leaving the truck. I just put these on, and you don't know they're there. You wear them all day, and particularly in my circumstances, right now the rifles I'm running are all outfitted with muzzle brakes, and you need that hearing protection when you're for shooting in general, but particularly with a muzzle brake. So I highly recommend that. I'll jump right to this little package because it also contains a few items that I like to keep in the top of the pack, which also includes a spare pair of earplugs. And so always nice to have those, and also that you can loan these to or just give them to and replace them to a friend if someone's with you. It's kind of a courteous thing to do if you're shooting muzzle brakes or loud magnums anyway. And then this has my hunting tags and some electrical tape and just a few other items. There's actually a pen and a small notebook in here. And I usually will take most of my notes on my phone, but it's nice to have this as a backup. Maybe if I want to remind myself of something, or even leave a note for someone else somewhere, which has happened a few times. I've got a lens cloth, and also there are a few Benadryl in here. For some reason, I have these outside my first aid kit just to be convenient if I happen to have any allergic reaction or anything like that. And I think that's most of what's in this little baggie goes in the top of the pack. And again, because I was running this particular pack, which has a lot of pockets, I'll just use the plastic bags and put these in different locations, kind of the same location all the time. I know where they are. I'll typically check things before I go out, and after every trip, if I use something, I make sure it gets replaced if it needs to. However, with some of the other packs that I use and have used, I might just put these things into a small sack or dry bag collectively, depending on what I want to do. So again, moving along, this is fun. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk about that. Keep a small first aid kit. I mean, always shouldn't we have that? So I've got some clotting bandage, a variety of Band-Aids and steri strips. I've got Lucra tape. I've got some more electrical tape there. I've got some medical or first aid type tape. And this is pretty basic, but I always have something like this no matter where I'm going. Sometimes if I'm going to be out for an extended trip, I may expand this and it may have numerous other items, but for a day trip, this is how I like to roll. Fire starter, always good to have that. I like to have some redundancy built into that as well. So in this package, I will have some waterproof matches, which are actually in a waterproof container inside the plastic bag. I talk about redundancy. I'll take a lighter. It's always good to check these lighters once in a while too. Make sure that they are working. Sometimes they get a little sluggish for any number of reasons, but yeah, keep a few of those. Keep one of them around in the package. And as far as fire starter goes, there's all sorts of different brands here. This one is actually a product from Duraflame, and then I also have a few of these various sizes of kind of like the wax-coated fiberboard stuff. And equally well, I'll run my own many times just using the old film canisters with Vaseline soaked cotton balls. They're very effective. And every once in a great while, I'll use the bushcrafter method of, maybe I'm splitting some wood and I'll shave down some wood shavings. They're really good for starting a fire. But I tend to not like to do that as much when I'm out hunting because I just don't want to dull the blade on my fixed blade knife. And so that is how I roll with the fire starter. And by the way, where I've been hunting, it's in forested country, a lot of old growth Douglas fir, in fact, so dead firewood is available easily, even very small twigs, so it's really easy to get a fire started. And I was doing that quite a bit. I'll come back to talk about that. And then in this package, this is, let's say, part of my lighting system. So I always carry a headlamp, and I've got, as I'm sure most of you do, tons of different models. I love the newer technology that's available. I'm moving towards more rechargeables, but this one happens to be a battery operated model, AAAs. And then I also always make sure to bring spare batteries. These are 2 sets of spare batteries wrapped in tape in a separate bag, again, just making sure things don't get messy. And then, speaking of redundancy, I like to carry one of these. You can get these, at the checkouts, most sporting goods stores, but it's one of these clip lights which you put on the brim of your hat. So I'm usually always running a ball cap, and it gives me that little extra light, particularly if I am processing an animal in the dark, which happened this year. And so nice to have this. It also gives you a little bit of a backup feature there. So I don't think you're never going to regret having good quality lighting and enough of it. In fact, as I put these things back in this bag, I have one other light that I would usually bring along, and that's just a small LED flashlight. I like a flashlight a lot of times just to be in the hand because you can direct the beam. Sometimes that's easier than using your headlamp. And great when if you want to turn it on and off. Let's say you're negotiating some interesting areas, or you need to throw a beam to look at something. A flashlight's good, and a lot of times when I'm hiking in the dark somewhere, I'll just put this in my pocket. But eventually it finds its way back into the pack in most situations. Sorry about the crinkling sound if you're listening. I'm just moving some of these bags around. I always carry a spork, keep it in the top of the pocket of the pack. You never know when you're going to be eating something, whether you're cooking up some freeze-dried or dehydrated products, which occasionally I'll even do on a day trip. They're nice to have. Or if you're eating something like a canned sardine or what have you. Great to have this as a little tool, and I always make sure that there's one in my pack. Now, a couple other things that typically are in the top pocket. I just bring a small carabiner. You never know when you need to clip something. And sometimes I'll run my water bottle, for example, inside the pack. But if I'm going to put it on the outside of the pack, in the pockets, I'm generally, like with this one, it's pretty easy to run one of the straps through so this thing can't fall out and disappear on you. Maybe there's a pro tip. But also it's handy to have this to be able to clip it, to give it maybe a little more reach or security, again, for other things. But I've just gotten into the habit of bringing this along. Sometimes I find it useful. So I guess I jumped to the water bottle, and during this late season, I'm always carrying, a bottle like this. I like this particular style of top because it's very easy to drink from versus, let's say, other variations where I don't really like the inserts that go inside of Nalgene and other styles of bottles. One thought would be stainless steel. That from a health perspective, that's certainly more popular and more valuable, but there is more weight. So I'll usually still run the Lexan, or in this case, an aluminum bottle. And one thing to think about is a lot of the negative factors that can happen with these types of bottles is related to heat and sunlight. So if the bottle is in the direct sunlight, ultraviolet light, or it's got hot liquids or it's exposed to heat, that's when you're going to get more molecular transfer and potential health issues. But in the cold, not so much. So wanted to mention that. There's probably another semi-pro tip there. Since I'm on liquids, I'll just stick with that, and I usually carry a small thermos. I just like having it available. I'm willing to pack the weight. Again, decent packs, they always make a difference. And whether that's tea or soup or some coffee, I'll usually have this, and it really comes in handy if you're doing glassing or doing some sitting. And actually, I think it's good to take breaks as a hunter in particular, but also just as a person who is in the natural world, in the wilderness, and take it all in. If you just constantly move, you don't really, I think, get the maximum out of your experience or even your effectiveness as a hunter. So these are just nice to have. And since I was talking about that, I'll kind of show next up this, my coffee setup. And I've got several pots or cups that I use. This happens to be the one that was in service, which is a lightweight aluminum And I have some that are titanium as well. And then the collapsible cup, and all this stuff meshes together, but this happens to be a collapsible cup. I think it's got the name brand on it here. Yes, it is a Sea to Summit. And that's nice because you can heat water, make whatever you're going to make, and then not end up burning your hands or your lips. And so if you've ever used, let's say it's a stainless steel or a titanium mug, those are great, especially the ones with the lids, but you almost can't drink out of them for a while because you're at risk of burning your lips or tongue. And so this transfer is nice. I prefer that. And then right now, this was just some instant coffee, a couple different roast variations that I was using. I really enjoy this Creature Comfort and would recommend it for anybody. Let's see. I'm going to go to the far stuff before I go to the near stuff. And so I typically, this time of year, I'll take along a glassing pad. It's nice when you're sitting, even when you're wearing really high-tech gear, to have a little bit of cushion, a little bit of insulation. And so this just happens to be an old piece of insulation. I had another one that was made out of closed-cell foam, which is a bit nicer. I gave it to a friend this year who was quite enamored with it. So a glassing pad, or whatever you want to call it, it works really well when you're sitting down, and can also be useful when you're kneeling, especially if you're processing an animal on your knees. So weighs nothing, and this usually goes on the outside of the pack somewhere. I'll just run it through the straps. If, like the one I gave away, it had a bit more value, so I just ran a hole through it and a small lanyard with a plastic clip so I could clip it to the pack so it wouldn't disappear. This one, obviously I haven't done that with, but that's an option. And then depending on the state that you're hunting in, obviously, you need your orange, depending on the season, of course, as well. And sometimes I'll take two of these. I like the ones that are synthetic. They're lighter, and if you have one on your person, you can put another on your pack, or if you harvest an animal, you can put it on antlers if you're packing them for additional safety. Lots of uses for those during the season. So then I go back to one little item which I had left laying here, which was in that top pocket, and it's just a small sleeve that I can put my phone in if it's not in my pocket, or for any reason, just to give it a little bit of extra protection. Weighs nothing, but I found this to be useful, especially if I'm in like a camping situation, and I can set the phone down and not worry about getting snow in the camera lens or anything like that in the ports. So that's about it. Now, as I move over to this pile that's near me, this, I guess most people would say it's the kill kit, or it's your game processing items for harvesting, or whatever you want to say. Well, I'll probably go to knives first, and I do usually run a pocket knife, and I think I'll just grab that now to show. I've talked about before, I like a mid-sized pocket knife. A lot of times I will remove the clip so I can run it inside the pocket with the zipper closed, in a zippered pocket. To me, that's the best of all worlds. If I run the clip and I just clip it into my pants, I've had a few of these disappear. They work their way out, and sometimes you don't know it, and it's a bit of a heartbreaker. It can be. So this one, even though it still has the clip, I run it inside the zippered pocket. And this one is it's a Benchmade. It's I'm not sure exactly what model it is, but it's a Mel Pardue design. Kind of got a modified point there, sort of halfway between a clip point and a drop point. Great grind on this 154 cm steel. It's still razor sharp, and I haven't touched this up since I processed an elk a few weeks ago. So great tool there. And then in the pack, in the quote-unquote kill kit, that's where I have two more knives. So I will always have a fixed blade skinning style knife. That's just my preference. This one I've had for a while. It's a cold steel. It's the Pendleton Light Hunter, and also still razor sharp. I wrap a little bit of colored tape, orange tape around this, so if I set it down, it doesn't disappear on me, which happened once, and this spent a year in the forest, but I did manage to go back and find it. Great knife. I tend to like the ones which have mostly a drop point style blade and synthetic handles. I'm really fond of those. This is an exceptionally light knife as well. And I have numerous ones, but this one served me great in the kit. Now, moving on just a bit, I will also carry a fillet knife or a boning knife. During the elk season, if I'm hunting a solo, which I did exclusively this past month, and I know I'm going to be deboning meat because weight is of primary concern, and so this just happens to be the Gerber. This is, I think, their Gator Grip style. This is a semi-flexible knife. It's got a little bit of an upsweep to it. Works great for, especially like say deboning a shoulder if you want to take it off in one piece and really get close to the bone, or you're cutting meat away from the pelvis with the hindquarters. Really a nice thing. It doesn't weigh too much. I can certainly do all that with this type of knife, but I do like having this along when I'm certain I'm going to be deboning. Another thing I've always got with me is a folding saw. This one is the Baco Laplander, and it is it's seen a lot of use. This is kind of a hybrid or combination blade. You can cut wood or bone with it. So if you're cutting out rib racks or you're doing a skull cap, great for that. But also, I find it really useful in the firewood gathering arena. One of the things as a therapist, I'm always interested in ergonomics, and when you're breaking limbs or breaking sticks, they get to a certain size where you really have to crank them over your leg, or you're going to kick them like a ninja, or you're snapping them off of dead trees. You have to be careful. Sometimes they can break in odd areas and fly in different directions, and there's just an injury possibly waiting to happen either to you or someone else. And so once the firewood choice gets a little larger, using the saw is great. Super fast, you get nice uniform pieces, and it also comes in handy when you're removing elk teeth just by creating a bit of a hammer and mallet situation. So once I look at those tools, I see next the sharpening steel. Then I'll take this as one of these collapsible ones that can be stored in this little pouch, but it's a rod style. So I've used some flat ones. I like a steel for just basically touching up or honing an edge. And if you do that frequently with any of these types of knives, you typically never get so dull that you get into trouble. If, however, that does happen, and it can, especially if you're taking apart an elk on a mountainside in the dark and you have to deal with the position that it's in when you're by yourself. I'll take one of these little V-notch devices, and you can draw the blade through there. I like to be gentle with these, not necessarily too aggressive. You don't want to necessarily change the edge angle that you've worked hard to put onto a blade, but this can come in handy. It weighs nothing. I've got a couple of different ones of these. But that one's in the kit. Now, I'll use some type of glove. Keeps the hands a little warmer, helps you with the grip. Makes it clean up a little bit less challenging. I mean, if I don't have gloves, I'll just deal with it. But sometimes I'll use these dishwashing style gloves. They're a little bit more sturdy and durable than the nitrile type that you can get in the boxes at the store. So I do like these. I'll even occasionally wear a cloth glove that's got the rubberized, cloth glove that's got that rubberized cover on it. So good to have that. And then an assortment of game bags. Generally, when I'm after elk, I'll be using something like these caribou bags, and these are great products. I've got a bunch of these in different brands. I'll also still bring along a couple of old pillowcases, from back in the day. But typically, if you've got these pillowcases that are cotton poly and they're old, they're super light, actually. They're not actually any heavier than these commercial bags. And a little bit of cordage for tying off the top. Great size when you're putting a deboned quarter of elk into. And I'll also bring along a couple of garbage bags. Now, one of the things I always talk about is you typically never want to put warm meat that's not cooled out into a garbage bag because it can sour. However, if the meat's cooled, depending on, let's say you've had some time for that to happen, I might cover it with a plastic bag, especially if it's going into my backpack as opposed to, let's say, on externally on the meat shelf. Might do that. You keep a couple of different kinds of bags, but also these are really handy if you're someone who's harvesting organ meats, like liver, heart, etc. They can just be a little bit messier. So once you get those cooled, these are great. And I'll keep all this kit that I just went through for harvesting in a stuff sack. And then maybe we're down to the last few things that I'm running as far as the pack dump goes, and that would be something that's in an exterior pocket that's accessible, kind of a toilet kit. So this has got toilet paper, paper towels, and some wipes, different variety. Always good to be prepared there, and that's what I have. And then last but not least, I always take a lightweight tarp. So that I can, and some cordage, parachute cord, 550, that I can build a shelter with if I need. You can even use it sometimes to secure meat if that's indicated, but more than not, I like the security of having that in the pack. I have had times when, maybe not during this particular cold season, but I've been out in a downpour. You can make a quick shelter and just wait out the storm. That's nice, but also in more of a survival situation, you can make a tunnel tent and using your space blanket and some of the other clothing you've got, survive, maybe not thrive and be super comfortable, but depending upon the fire situation, possibly. So as I move along, those are like the items that were always in the pack, going out with me every time. The only thing I didn't talk about or show here was food, and that would vary from day to day. I'd usually take a gallon Ziploc bag with a selection of foods and snacks that I liked, that had available, and maybe a little surplus. You never want to run out, especially if you end up having to spend the night having a little more. So that was it. Now, if I shift gears, I'm going to go into most of the clothing system that I was using. There is another item or two that I'll talk about, but all of these items, almost all of them, I'm going to do separate reviews on. Talk about the test that I put these things through. Let's see, I think my total mileage that I tracked was 117 miles in the mountains, quite a bit of that off trail in these cold temperatures. So I got to use a lot of this stuff and vet it, and that's what I'm going to be reporting on. So if I kind of go, let's say with the base layers first, this Smart Wool boxer brief, it's probably, I would say, the best that I've yet used, and I've used a lot of different brands, of course, but it's a merino blend. And I guess I should talk about merino for a minute. Merino is a tiny bit, or can be more than a tiny bit, but it can be warmer than, say, synthetic fabrics. It doesn't dry as quickly or perhaps wick as well, but it depends on, again, how much you're going to be perspiring and whatnot. But with the brief, what I love about these things, it's a great feel next to skin. It's very comfortable, and also they tend to not retain odor, like the synthetics. And so, love the Smart Wool boxer. Then, as far as my base layer goes, in the past I've used merino, and I like it when things get colder because, again, you can get a little bit more warmth out of your layer, warmth per weight. But because I was hiking in the mountains and had some steep country, I didn't want to sweat too much, but I definitely didn't want to get wet. And so I went with synthetic and using Under Armour Cold Gear, which I'm really a big fan of. The nice thing about these is they're snug fitting, and so they don't kind of get feeling kind of loose and baggy as you're walking around, which can get uncomfortable. So wearing the Under Armour base layer on the bottom, and I will often, if it's only going to be into the 20s, I won't wear long underwear. I'll just wear whatever pants, mid to heavyweight pant that I'm going to be using. But needed it at 14 below and near there. So that was good. I'll stick with the lowers, and this was the, let's see, this is Kuiu Talus pant. And this is actually, it's my favorite hunting pant. They nailed it with this. What I like about it, the pocket positions are just so instinctive and ergonomic. And when you, let's say if you run your phone in the side pocket, it doesn't get too low or floppy, holds it snug. Love that. Um, Got just enough stretch that you benefit from it. It's got this extra reinforced fabric on the seat, the lowers, and then it has knee pads. These are integrated knee pads, not very thick, and they're articulated. Really good. It's just a great pant, the QU Taos pant, and I just ran this the whole time, a few times because I was coming back and forth. It was easy to put them in the wash. And then I did take overpants. I've talked before about how I'm not against puffy pants, but I find that with puffies, you have to be extremely careful where you sit and not to walk around, or they turn into duct tape pants because you're tearing them. This is the Kuyu Kenai pant. It's a full zip, so I don't have to take off anything to put this on. So a couple times while glassing or just sitting and resting, when it was cold, I put these on. And obviously, if you can sit in the sun when it's a sunny day, that helps you quite a bit. But sometimes when you're hunting, you don't always have those options. So those are my pants. Then if I keep on this theme, I am really fond of a merino blend sock. This is for later season. I like a mid-weight sock that's over the calf. These are from Schnee's, the local company, and did great. No complaints. I typically don't run liners. I just like a good sock, and it seems to do the trick for me, which made it all the way. I would tell you that a couple of those mornings when it was 14, 12 below, my toes got a little cold the first couple hours, but things did warm up. So it was good enough. If it was any colder than that, I'd have to be considering a pack boot, which I don't like to hike a lot of miles in, but that was where I was. Then I was using, and have been using for a number of years, this Crispy Nevada boot. It's really one of my favorite boots that I've had. My feet were always dry. Now I do use the brand specific waterproofing cream that they recommend, and it does work quite well. These, I can't tell you how many miles these things have on them, but we're starting to lose some of the edge on the tread, and I might get them resold or look at something else and just move these to a lighter usage. But it was a great boot, and nothing but happy with how that worked. I'll be doing a bigger review, and also have been running for a number of years these Kuyu Yukon Gators. I think now they've got the Yukon HD out, but this has worked well for me. What I like about a lot of the Kuyu products is they tend to have a slim athletic fit, and that really works well for me. And these did great. They're stiff enough that they don't slide down. Their fabric has a little bit of flex. It's very water repellent, and you can really snug this down on a boot so you can dash across a small stream, and the fit is tight enough that you don't really get any water infiltration, which is wonderful. Then here's another exciting product. Essentially, picked these up last year, and these are the Katula micro spikes. So it's kind of like a mini crampon, if you will, and these have a really good retention system to go on the boot, and then the spikes did come in handy. You have to be kind of selective about the conditions that you're using them in. Obviously, ice and snow, it's really where you want these. And what I found was if the snow got as close to a foot deep, I didn't need these because the snow itself kind of gives you both a traction and a braking mechanism. But when you've got just a little snow over rocky as well as forested terrain with a lot of sticks that can be slippery when they're covered with ice snow. These were great, and the beauty is that they allow you then to walk without tensing up and using all that muscular force to kind of try to bite the edge of your boot in. And these were good. Then if I look at the upper body, or kind of moving on up, also using an Under Armour Cold Gear, this top, and great, just light, and I didn't get too sweaty most of the trips, but just basically moving layers up up and down outer layers, I was able to vent and wick and dry. So hats off to Under Armour for this product. This is my favorite top. I've been through so many. This is a Sitka product. It's their heavyweight hoodie. And, you know, again, I want to give these guys credit. You know, I like different things from different companies, but the hood has such good full face coverage, and you can zip it up and down. It really makes a difference. In fact, anymore, I don't wear beanies as much because I do like having a ball cap. And then when you have a ball cap, you can just put the hood over. And these work great. This fabric's just got enough weight to it that there were a couple times only when it was a little bit warmer and I was going uphill when all I was running was my base layer and this, and I was fine. So great product. Then I also had my ball cap, and this isn't anything special. This is old, but what I like about these types is it's polyester. It's a synthetic, so it dries quickly. I also like the fact that this one has these ear flaps, so you can kind of get a little extra coverage when you need it. You have to be careful with the ball caps. A lot of them are cotton, and you just don't want to take cotton out, especially this time of year, because if it gets wet, it's just useless, and actually it's detrimental to your health. What else to say? I also don't typically use the trucker caps with the mesh in the back, even when it's warm. It's a little bit, I don't mind having full coverage, but also for the sun protection, I like something that's a little thicker. So I just run the ball cap. Nothing special. I'm not necessarily going to do a review on this, but it is just a piece of kit that I have. And then also in my pocket, this probably dates back to the old days. I'll take a handkerchief along. It has multiple uses as well as first aid applications. So I'm usually running that. And then as far as a glove goes, I've been around and around with gloves, but I like to run a relatively lightweight, sometimes what people might call a heavier lightweight glove, but maybe not a true midweight glove, because I know I've got the mittens available for when it's cold. In fact, with a light enough glove, you can throw the mitten right over the glove if you're in a pinch and need to do that. But what I like about these are Kuiu attack gloves, is they have a leather palm, so it's the kind of that I think it's called Petard's leather. It's a little grippy, so it gives you some grip, good tactile management with your firearm and other things. I can use this finger for shooting if I need to, because it's not too thick for trigger control, and nice glove. I mean, there's other ones I've used, some insulated gloves, thinly insulated from Mechanics, which I've liked as well. But this was my go-to glove, and it worked great. So that was most of the stuff that was covering me head to toe, and then I get to these outer layers, and this was just a great piece, and I've used this for several years. This is the Kuiu Guide jacket. I don't know for sure if this is the Guide DCS Pro. There might be some other words like this, but it's kind of like was their premium soft shell for several years. And even in this world of talking about active insulation products, I really have been like this and benefited from it. Again, once we get into our later season, if we're getting precip, it typically is snow. This is plenty of repellency for me. It's relatively light. These things are not the easiest to pack. They do have some bulk, but I rarely took it off. So again, what I liked about it, lots of pockets, so both internal and for hands and also at the chest. Great articulated hood design. And maybe this is another pro tip. I typically will buy my outer shell jacket for late season, several variants I've used over the years, one size up. So I typically run a large, but I'll use an extra large in this. Two things. When you're wearing a backpack, you got just a little more freedom of movement. Doesn't bind up, doesn't ride up on the bottom. When you have a little bit bigger coat, still nobody really minds the fashion statement. And it does give you that extra ability to put your insulating layer inside of it, or put this over the insulating layer, which is what I was doing. So running the same puffy I've been using for a couple years. This is the Super Down Pro by Kuyu, and it's in their, I think this is their original popular camo. I forget what they call it. I think it's the Vias camo. Nice. I didn't need camo. Could have run solid. This is what I had. And this thing's super compressible. So with the down puffies, I'll typically put those in the stuff sack, and this does compact down really well. I needed this a few times. When I was moving, I was fine just with the shell jacket, but there were a few times when I was sitting still and I popped this on, and a couple times when I even put the shell over it, and it was amazing, wonderful, and glorious to be so comfortable. So whatever you use, this is kind of what I recommend. Now I'm now down to like the final couple things here. Bino harness, I've been through a number of those, but this year I've been running the marsupial gear, or marsupial. This one has the magnet at the top, full coverage. Really good. The ergonomics of how it fits worked well for me, and it's just easy on and off access for the binos I was running, which this year I got these new earlier in 2022. This is the SIG. It's the Kilo 3000 BDX, and it has the integrated rangefinder, 10 by 42, fairly good glass actually, but the rangefinder feature is just phenomenal. So I've really enjoyed those. I will usually carry an 8 or 10 power on self, and the marsupial gear did really well. I also, in the pocket, I think I have a little bit of, if I can get it out, Dermatone. This is Dermatone, excuse me, moisturizing and water-free broad spectrum lips and face protection cream. One of the things that happens is if I'm out there glassing, usually you're on an exposed knob or mountaintop or something, and you've either got the sun or the wind, and you get a little bit of a burn or some chapping, and this is nice just to have that, so that's why I keep it in there. I think that's just about everything for the pack dump and late season gear list that I was using. So this is everything that I was out there with, putting it to the test and surviving and thriving, actually. So if you like these kind of videos, let me know if you'd like to see more. The questions and comments, I certainly welcome them. And thank you so much for being with me today. Till next time, this is Coach Jay-Z signing off from the Lifetime Athlete YouTube channel and podcast.